Hello and welcome back to yet another episode of On the Grid Podcast, Season 4, Episode 30 today. At the time of recording, we're still waiting for a race week. We're still a couple of days before the United States Grand Prix weekend begins. And in this episode, we're just going to have a look ahead to the future of Formula One, the future in 2025, which is the three rookies on the grid in Kimi Antonelli, Ollie Bearman, and Jack Doohan. I'm your host, Adrian. Joining me, as ever, is my co-host, Ethan Evans. Ethan, first and foremost, I'll ask you this very important question. We can maybe evaluate the question at the end of the episode. But in your humble opinion, who do you think is going to be the standout rookie next season?
I mean, it'd be easy to say Kimi Antonelli because obviously he's going to be the one with the best car. But I think on a sort of competitive team, I think Ollie Bearman will be. He's already had that experience in Formula One. He's had a couple of races now, and performed very well there. Up against Esteban Ocon, who is, I think, a very good benchmark for a rookie like Ollie Bearman. So it'll be easy. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, I'd say compared to their teammate, probably Ollie Bearman, but obviously Kimi Antonelli should end the season on the most points.
So, just to put into perspective, like I've already mentioned, there's three rookies on the grid in Kimi Antonelli, Jack Doohan, and Ollie Bearman next season. Liam Lawson has obviously replaced Daniel Ricciardo for the final few races in the 2024 F1 season, but his seat is yet to be confirmed. So we're only rolling on the basis of the rookies that have been confirmed. But then on the flip of it, do you class Liam Lawson as a rookie? Because last season he had that stint for Daniel Ricciardo. This season he's got that stint for Daniel Ricciardo. It is kind of his rookie season next season if he does come in. But can you class him as a rookie? That's the only question. But let's sort of start from the top. Let's start from the youngest driver, Kimi Antonelli. Obviously joining Mercedes, big shoes to fill for to replace Lewis Hamilton. Pairing up with George Russell, Toto Wolff going for a relatively young partnership, similarly to McLaren. Kimi Antonelli, only 18 years old. I believe he's one of the very few drivers who are making an appearance in Formula One as a teenager, alongside obviously Ollie Bearman as well here. But Ethan, the pressure on Kimi Antonelli is probably really high, purely down to the basis that Toto Wolff believes the ceiling to be very high for Kimi Antonelli. Um, how do you think he'll fare against George Russell? How do you think he'll adapt to the machinery? Because we've seen that he's very quick. He's got raw talent, but is this first season going to be him nurturing that raw talent and kind of creating somewhat of a finished product of what we could see in the years to come?
Yeah, obviously, he's coming in as a teenager still. There'll be a lot of pressure on him because he's in a top car. As a Formula One driver, the pressure is always on, and especially so when you're in one of the big teams, one of the big seats. So there's been a lot of talk. It's now up to him to see if he can deliver. I think, obviously George Russell has been in Formula One for a while now. He's been in the sport for several years. He's a well-established driver. He's a very, very quick driver. He's taken the fight to Lewis Hamilton over their 3 seasons together. So that shows you the level George Russell with that. Antonelli, obviously, be as close to as he can to George Russell, I think will be the outlook from Mercedes. If he can be close to Russell on a consistent basis, and that is a good sort of starting point to him. And then obviously as the years progress, he can look at just challenging Russell and cement himself as the number one. But to begin with, I think just being as close as he can to Russell, delivering for Mercedes, getting as many points as possible would be the main aim.
Also for Kimi Antonelli, we have spoken on numerous occasions on this podcast where we saw maybe Kimi Antonelli do a George Russell and jump into the Williams car to kind of give him that one season to sort of break through and to kind of nurture his talent and then jump into the top seat. Um, but Kimi Antonelli is not doing that. He's jumping straight into the top seat at Mercedes. To begin with, Ethan, what do you think the expectations are from Mercedes? Is he going to be with a car underneath him? Is he most likely his target to be regular in Q3 and regular point scoring, or do you think maybe the first couple of races it will be the pressure might be off him ever so slightly, and Q3 might not be in a maybe like a Q2 and a points finish down lower in the points. What do you make of the expectations that Mercedes could be putting on him at the start of the season?
Well, I think points is a must. Q3 and points is a must. On a very consistent basis. Obviously, you can have the odd slip up here and there, but if you're in one of the, Mercedes this season have been between the second and fourth quickest car, majority of the races, so he should be scoring points pretty much every single race. There's got to be a very good reason why he's not scoring points. So that's the minimum, I think, from Mercedes' point of view, and then anything above that would be a bonus. If how often do we look at it as the top eight when we do our ratings, when we do our predictions? So I don't think that's going to be any different, even if he is seventh or eighth at the start of the season. That would be a good foundation. But anything below that, you got to think, okay, right, you can allow it for a couple of races, but then the pressure will start to build, and there'll start to be question marks.
We talk about question marks, and I think we can probably do a bit of a comparison here with Sergio Perez, who's under a little bit of pressure at Red Bull, and he has been for the last year or so, and he's been at the team for what I believe it's his third season at Red Bull now, Sergio Perez. So does Antonelli have that sort of cushion, especially with him being 18 and with Mercedes viewing him as a foundation for the future of the team? Do they view it as have one season to have whatever to do whatever you can, and then from season 2 and 3 and onwards, whatever he does at Mercedes has to be to Mercedes standards, so potentially fighting for wins and the podiums and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, Mercedes aren't trying to take a year out, I don't think. I think they still have aspirations to compete for wins and podiums on a regular basis. If you can get a couple of podiums next season, that's great. And that really sets them up nicely. But it's like I said, I think it's compared to Russell, because if Mercedes rock up Bahrain and they're sort of 45 seconds behind the quickest car, which we presume will be the McLaren based on this season, but 45 seconds behind the quickest car throughout the race pace, and that's George Russell driving, then you've got to be a bit sort of conservative with your expectations. But he has to deliver. We can't have a season out, to drive around, have a bit of fun, drive in circles. He's got to be scoring points, and he's got to be scoring decent points. Especially, I think a couple of podiums for him, and that will be a good foundation for next season, and some consistent performances. Behind Russell, maybe the odd occasion where he can challenge and fight with Russell or even beat him. But, he's a tremendous talent. I don't think he'll have any issues with that. It will be about what he can deliver long term. And I think Mercedes do view this as a project.
So if we just look into round off Antonelli and look at a bit of a fact file about him. So like we've mentioned, 18 years old. He's an Italian F4 winner in his second season. He's won the ADAC F4 in his first attempt. He's an FIA Motorsport Games F4 Cup winner. He's won the Formula Regional Middle East Plus European Plus European Championship in his first season, skipping F3 and going straight into F2. And in F2 currently, he's got 2 wins and 3 podiums, sitting 6th in the championship. Just to round off Antonelli, do you think the higher he finishes in the Formula 2 Championship, the better for him? We know that the F2 cars have changed ever so slightly from what they used to be, especially with the cars in Formula 3 being sort of what we had in F2 a season or two ago. Do you think that the F2 machinery, because it's getting evolved so much closer to the Formula 1 car, do you think that if he finishes as high as possible in that championship, it kind of sets him up for what could be a successful debut campaign at Mercedes?
No, I don't think so, to be honest. I think, we look at Ollie Bearman, he's rightfully so got a seat in at Haas. We'll get onto him in a minute, but you got to judge by his Formula 2 season. It's not been great. He's languishing sort of mid-tabled. He's got one win this season, but again, he's a tremendous talent. He fully deserves a seat in Formula One. He's proven, in his two outings in F1 that he can deliver the business. So, it doesn't always translate to Formula One between Formula 2 and Formula One. And we've also seen great F2 drivers struggle in F1. Nick De Vries is a prime example of that. We've also seen them not given a chance, like Drugovich, Porsche. So it doesn't always correlate. And I think for between now and the end of the season, it'll be about Antonelli showing what he can do and really getting himself set up for next season.
I'd counter that, and I'd say that we have seen a lot of F2 champions or a lot of successful F2 drivers go on to great things. We've had obviously Lando Norris, George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, who's a recent one who's doing very well. But like you say, it doesn't potentially translate into Formula One as we move on to Ollie Bearman, because if we start from where he is now currently in F2, he's currently 15th with 2 wins and 2 podiums. But if you actually look into his 2021 F1 career, in 2 races, he's in 16th place, ahead of the likes of Kevin Magnussen, Esteban Ocon, Valtteri Bottas, Guan Yu Zhou, etc., etc., with 7 points in the championship after scoring points for Ferrari and for Haas. The first ever driver to score points for 2 teams in a single season. But like you've mentioned there, undoubtedly, Ollie Bearman has the talent and the potential to become yet again another successful British driver. We've had so many British drivers come through the ranks and have done very, very successfully. What do you think for him, for Ollie Bearman? Obviously, at Haas, he's capable of scoring points, and he showed it at Baku. What do you think the expectations on his shoulders will be, especially with Esteban Ocon as his teammate, a little bit more experienced than what George Russell is to Kimi Antonelli? But what do you think Ollie Bearman's kind of main targets and main aspirations will be heading into this campaign, into the 2025 campaign?
Well, I mean, he's got more points than Kevin Magnussen in 2 races. Magnussen's been there for the rest of the season. So, like it goes back to the point we said about Antonelli. It doesn't always translate, and he's done fantastic in those 2 outings in Formula One, without being spectacular this season. Again, it will be, I think for Haas, again, it would be putting the groundwork in 25 to really prepare and attack the new regulations in 26. Haas done brilliantly in 22 when the new regs came in. After having 2021 where they were awful and the worst car on the grid by a country mile. So yeah, it will be about getting familiarized with the setup with the team, and that's why I think that outing in Baku will be so valuable, so important. Because giving him that opportunity to get in the car already and bend himself into that team, get to know the engineers, and all of that. So, I think he has the ability to match Ocon, to be very close. But again, it's about being as close as possible and beating him on, when he can, as and when he can. But again, I don't think Haas are hiring him thinking he's going to be beating Ocon come the end of the season, because I think that might say more about their acquisition of Ocon if after close to a decade in Formula One, he can't outscore a rookie with 2 races. So there we go. It'll be an interesting one. That is one of the driver pairings I'm excited to see him most.
Obviously, with Bearman and with Kimi Antonelli, there's a massive mismatch in the car machinery. The Mercedes obviously being out near the front, and the Haas being a strong midfield contender. But that being said, obviously they are Prema teammates currently in Formula 2. One's doing better than the other. It's not translating, obviously, to what it could be next season in Formula One. But for Ollie Bearman, what do you think he can pick up from Esteban Ocon? Because for Antonelli's sake, he can pick up a lot from George Russell when it comes to qualifying. Because George Russell, for example, was named Mr. Saturday once in his Williams days. But what do you think Ollie Bearman can pick up from Esteban Ocon? Esteban Ocon, yes, he's not known to have had the best of seasons this season in 2024. Um, but just the knowledge and the know-how of Esteban Ocon, do you think that will help Ollie Bearman kind of rejig his focus and kind of maybe get setups down to a T when it comes to race day, when it comes to qualifying day, because all of those setups, fine adjustments, they're very important in the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, I think there's a lot that he can learn. Esteban Ocon is a very, very good driver. He beat Fernando Alonso over the 2 seasons they were together as teammates. He beat him on points. So this is not some guy who doesn't deserve to be in Formula One. This is a top driver who has a bit of a reputation as a bit of a teammate killer. Has a lot of incidents with teammates, whether that's Gasly, Alonso, even Sergio Perez back at Force India. There is a history there of having tussles and having a lot of incidents with his teammate. And I hope that doesn't translate into Haas, because I think that is a pairing where, Ocon could really sort of help Bearman and almost form like a mentor role to less of an extent. Obviously, their teammates, the first judge of a Formula One driver is what you're doing in comparison to your teammate. But I think there's a whole host of knowledge and know-how that Bearman can learn from such a seasoned professional like Ocon.
Just to round off a bit about Haas, like you mentioned earlier, you said that this driver pairing you're most excited to kind of look out for. Do you think that this driver pairing, the ones that have been confirmed, do you think that potentially this could be the most tight inter-team battle, the raw talent of Ollie Bearman and the kind of the knowledge and the kind of the expertise of Esteban Ocon, especially with Ocon being in the sport for about a decade? Do you think that maybe not tussling between each other, but do you think that maybe just like relative on-track battles will kind of help Ollie Bearman like grit his teeth into the sport and kind of know where he's standing and what he actually needs to do in terms of the inter-team battle with Esteban Ocon? Because I think, like you pointed out, I think this could be the tightest battle in the inter-team battles that we've got on the grid in 2025.
In terms of the sort of the rookies and the new drivers, I think this will be the closest, because if you think Gasly against Doohan, it should be a bit of a mismatch, and same with Russell against Antonelli. Whereas this, I would say this would probably be the two closest. And that says more about Bearman than it does about Ocon. I think he's a tremendous talent. But it will be interesting to see how they work as a duo, and whether they can work together for the good of the team, or whether it gets a bit tense and Ocon maybe feels a bit of pressure, sort of, where to really stamp his authority and knock Bearman down a peg and saying, no, actually, I'm the experienced one here. You know your place.
So just to round off Ollie Bearman with a bit of a fact file. So a year older than Kimi Antonelli at 19 years old. They both won the ADAC F4 championship, but Ollie Bearman did it in his second season. He did win the Italian F4 in his first season, whereas Antonelli did it in the second season. In 2022, in F3, he came third with one win and 8 podiums, propelling him into Formula 2, where in 2023 he finished sixth with 4 wins and 6 podiums. Currently, he's 15th in the championship with 2 wins and 2 podiums. And as we know, he's a point scorer on debut with Ferrari and Haas, 7 points in the championship currently. And that'll be his end tally, because I don't think there'll be any more appearances for Ollie Bearman unless there's a unknown emergency that happens in the near future. He's 16th after two races, like I said, ahead of the likes of Kevin Magnussen, his future teammate Esteban Ocon, seasoned veteran Valtteri Bottas, and Zhou Guan Yu. But rounding off the episode, let's move on to our final rookie, our final confirmed rookie, should I say, Jack Doohan. With Jack, I found it very hard because I think his karting career is more of a highlight than his actual racing career. He's been on the sidelines for the last year or so, because he's been a reserve driver for Alpine. And then after his F2 season finished last season, he's not actually done anything. He's been that reserve driver for Alpine. Jack Doohan, I think he's got very, very big shoes to fill. Obviously, in the motorsporting world, known as the son of motorbike legend Mick Doohan. Translating motorbikes to Formula One car and single seaters. What do you think would be the relative pressure for Jack Doohan heading into his first campaign in Formula One? Because he's waited for his chance. Obviously, Oscar Piastri turned down Alpine after they decided to announce him that he was not going anywhere. And Jack Doohan's finally got his chance. What do you think the relative expectation will be from his dad, Mick Doohan, and from the Alpine team heading into the 2025 campaign?
Yeah, I think it's good to see Alpine promoting from their own academy. I think there's a lot of drivers that have gone elsewhere. You look at Oscar Piastri, went to McLaren. Guan Yu Zhou was part of the sort of the Renault academy as it was in those days. Gone to Sauber. So it's good to see them promoting from within. I think it goes down to being in the right place at the right time, being part of that setup. And he must have impressed in there sort of as a reserve driver in the simulator sessions, helping out with the team. Otherwise, they would have gone elsewhere. So, he's obviously warranted his spot on the grid. And it'll be interesting to see how he does. I don't know what we're expecting from Alpine next season. They've been a bit of a bogey team this year. They've dropped off massively, and they don't look like their performance from week to week is all over the place. Like one week they'll be challenging for points, the next they'll be 18th and 16th or something like that. So I don't really know what to expect from Doohan next year. I'd imagine Gasly would have the best of him, but Gasly, again, like I said, is a very, very good driver. So I think this is probably the hardest to predict one.
Also, for Jack Doohan, do you think that it's a relative dive into the unknown? Like the two previous rookies that we've mentioned, Kimi Antonelli and Ollie Bearman, obviously they've been racing. They're currently racing in Formula Two, whereas Jack Doohan has had that season on the sideline. Or do you think he struggles, or do you think he has a similar type of outlook as Oscar Piastri, where Oscar Piastri was out for a season, managed to get a seat, and he's been performing to a tremendous has been performing tremendously. What do you think we could expect from Jack Doohan? We don't know what we can expect from the Alpine, but for Jack Doohan's sake, do you think there's going to be a sign of rustiness that could potentially creep in due to him not being out for a season, or do you think that he's going to have his head screwed on and he's going to be on it from the first race of a season?
No, I don't think it'll be too much of an issue, to be fair. I think that look at Oscar Piastri, like you mentioned, it didn't do him any harm. He was delivering from the first race and has been ever since. He's really been. Everybody said how impressed they've been of Oscar Piastri, challenging Lando Norris in the way he has. So I don't pay much attention to the year out. Sometimes it can actually help because you can actually fundamentally understand Formula One car and how they operate and sort of the process, the setup, simulator, all of these elements that go on behind the scenes that you don't talk about. I think sometimes that can actually help a driver prepare for Formula One. So it might be a blessing in disguise. We'll have to wait and see what happens come Australia next year, which is the first race, isn't it? So we'll wait and see what happens then. And yeah, I think it's a very difficult one to predict. But, I think Gasly should beat him, as I said, but we could say that about Russell and Ocon as well. They should be beating their rookie teammate. But it'd be very interesting to see how Doohan performs.
And just finally, obviously, Jack Doohan, another Australian on the grid, joining Oscar Piastri. Could have been joining Daniel Ricciardo if he wasn't for him being axed by RB. But do you think that Jack Doohan can follow in the footsteps in loose quotation marks, because Jack Doohan and Oscar Piastri are I believe are of similar ages. I think Oscar Piastri is a few years older. But do you think that Jack Doohan can follow in his fellow Australians' footsteps and kind of get I say get the most out of the F1 machinery? But Alpine and McLaren are kind of a bit of a mismatch. But do you think that Jack Doohan can follow in relative footsteps of Oscar Piastri and kind of pave a path for Australian motorsports to kind of be at the forefront of Formula One once again?
Well, he's got big boots to fill, doesn't he? Daniel Ricciardo, what, eight race wins, I think it was. I think it's since sort of this turbo hybrid era. I think there's only about five drivers that have got more wins in that period, and three of them are world champions. So, yeah, big boots to fill, and obviously Oscar Piastri has come in and done a fantastic job. So we'll wait and see on that front, but it'll be an interesting one. I think, we've got to be realistic with our expectations. He's not going to come in and be scoring a podium on the first weekend. But, a good solid campaign, sort of build his reputation up a little bit more, and then hopefully Alpine are in a position where they can fight for points on a consistent basis again. And then we can really see what he's about.
So just to round off Jack Doohan, 2 years older than Ollie Bearman, 3 years older than Kimi Antonelli at 21 years old, son of motorbike legend Mick Doohan. In the 2019-20 F3 Aging Championship, he finished in third place. Then moved on to Formula 3 for 2020, where he finished, I believe it was 26th. Then in the 2021 season in F3, he finished in second place with 4 wins and 7 podiums before making that step up to Formula 2. And then in 2023, he had his best season in Formula 2 with a third place finish with 3 wins and 5 podiums. And like we mentioned, for 2023 and 2024, he's been the reserve driver for Alpine. So Alpine promoting from within well and truly. Ethan, just before we round off the episode, if you could place all the 3 rookie drivers, where do you see them finishing in the championship? I'm not necessarily saying exact placements, but there or thereabouts. Kimi Antonelli probably most likely within the top 8. Are you expecting Ollie Bearman to be challenging 15th and above, and then Jack doing something similar, or what are you thinking? If you can rack your brains, where do you think all those rookies will be placing?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I want to throw it back to you after this because I would like to see you struggle as well. So Antonelli, I'd say 7th, 8th. Like I said, that's where he should be. He should be consistently challenging that top 7 or 8. Even if he finishes 8th by about 50 points, it might not be a failure of a season. Depends. So I'd say 7th for Antonelli on that one. Ollie Bearman's 16th, and he's only racing 2 races. So I'm going to go 15th for Ollie Bearman, and then I'm going to go 17th for Jack Doohan. Don't think they'll be rock bottom, but I don't think they'll be sort of mid-table, if you like.
Okay. I was gonna probably say the same for Kimi Antonelli. I was thinking probably 7th or 8th. I think out of those top 4 teams, I think if Perez is still misperforming at Red Bull, I think Antonelli will be probably fighting with him for 7th. With Ollie Bearman, I think if Haas produce the sort of machinery they have this season, and if Ollie Bearman's able to replicate what Nico Hulkenberg has done this season, I think he could be on for a very good season. So I'll probably speculate and say 14th for Ollie Bearman, and I'll probably say about 17th for Jack Doohan. It all depends on what Alpine deliver as a machine next season. If it's going to be one good week, one bad week, one good week, and a complete up and down roller coaster for Alpine once again next season. But if it isn't, Jack Doohan could be potentially scoring consistent points. But we'll have to wait and see what Alpine produce. And similarly with Haas, we already know what Mercedes are going to produce, and we know that it's going to be wanting to be near the top as they look to re-establish their dominance in Formula One. But that rounds off episode 30 of On the Grid podcast. We've had a look at the three rookies confirmed on next year's grid. We'll be back next week where we preview COTA. We have a look at the news ahead of the Circuit of the Americas, and we do our predictions ahead of the US Grand Prix next week. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.